that the king could not violate. We could look at the history of English common law, which established precedents of self-rule and expanded the rights and protections of citizens under the law. And let's not forget the English Civil War and the Glorious Revolution. The English Civil War in the mid-17th century, a conflict between king and parliament, as was the Glorious Revolution of the late 17th century, with the ultimate outcome being the strengthening of representative government, the weakening of monarchy. So we could talk about that. We could talk about the philosophers who influenced the Constitution, a John Locke, a Montesquieu, or we could talk about the document that preceded it, the Articles of Confederation, that was the original Constitution of this country. But that's not really why I'm here. Although if I was, we could talk about the original purpose of the Constitutional Convention. It was to revise the Articles of Confederation. So did you know that 74 delegates were invited, 55 chose to attend, 39 signed the Constitution? There were vigorous debates. They decided to scrap the articles and come up with a new document. They create a strong central government with the separation and balance of powers. So we could go into the various nuts and bolts of the different plans offered, trying to determine representation. We could even talk about some of the more controversial elements, the 3/5 compromise, because southern slave states were wondering, could we count our slaves in determining the number of representatives? And so the compromise was that slaves who had no rights or representation could be counted as 3/5 of a person when basing representation on population. So we could unpack the powers given to the president or the judicial branch, but that's not my focus today. But if it was, we could discuss the vigorous debates between the Federalist supporters of the Constitution and the anti-Federalist opponents on the road to ratification. We could talk about the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, the civil and legal rights bestowed all citizens. We could look at the less familiar amendments. For example, saying that a president can only run for 2 terms. That was the Republican Congress's idea after Franklin Delano Roosevelt won his 4th term as president. So we could discuss these things. Are the amendments relevant now? People are talking a lot about religious liberty in the First Amendment. Gun control, the right to bear arms, that's a big debate regarding the Second Amendment. The 14th Amendment is probably the most flexible amendment in the history of this country. It's been used to argue for the right to gay marriage, but also to define a corporation as a person, having the same rights as an individual. So that's one way to go about it, but that's not what I'm going to do today. What I could do is tell you a family story. That's how I could go about this. In August of 1920, the Tennessee General Assembly took up the question of whether to ratify the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. The initial vote count came up a 48-48 tie. My grandmother's cousin, a man by the name of Harry T. Burns, very popular with the ladies, it appears, in this picture, was going to cast the deciding vote. And his initial inclination was to vote no, until he got a letter from his mom. And his mother said very simply, "I have been watching to see how you stood, but have not noticed anything yet. Don't forget to be a good boy." The message was received, and Harry changed his mind and voted for the amendment. Tennessee became the 36th state to support the amendment, which meant that it was now ratified and women had the right to vote throughout the nation. So on behalf of my family, let me simply say, you're welcome. Well, that's one way to go about it, but that's not really what I'm going to do. I'll tell you what we could do. We could talk about how to interpret the Constitution. There are debates between what you could call originalism, Originalists say that the Supreme Court's role is to respect the intention of the founders and to uphold the will of the people as originally expressed in the Constitution, and nothing beyond that. But those who see the Constitution as a living document say that the court can and should provide updates, modifications that are needed. After all, the original Constitution was written for a largely agrarian nation of 4 million people, and now we're in a post-industrial nation of over 300 million. These are difficult issues to address. There is the risk of distorting the intention of the founders for political gain, or making an idol of the Constitution itself, as if it were Scripture. Speaking of which, here's a whole other idea of how to go about this topic. Is America a Christian nation? Scholars and citizens alike have been spilling ink and pixels on this question for decades, if not centuries. What is agreed upon is that Protestant beliefs and assumptions were significant in shaping the culture of colonial America, many of whom first came from Europe for religious concerns, religious liberty concerns. The First Amendment made sure there was no establishment of religion. That meant that the government would not favor or fund a particular expression of faith. But it also guaranteed the free practice of religion. And many founders like George Washington emphasized that religion and morality were the, quote, indispensable supports of the American system of government. I suppose we could wade into debates about the faith commitments of various founders, or ask what Thomas Jefferson meant when he used this phrase, wall of separation, in a letter to a group of Connecticut Baptists. We could talk about the Constitution's lack of references to God, or the Declaration of Independence's references to God. Or we could look at Supreme Court decisions on Bible reading and prayer in public schools, and so on. Maybe even talk about the Pledge of Allegiance and how the phrase under God was actually added in the 1950s. Or In God We Trust, which was on coins as early as 1864, but not on paper currency until 1957. But what would a generic reference to God mean? Does that mean we're a Christian nation? Wait, what exactly is a Christian nation? Is that an achievable goal? Is the debate over Christian America really about the past at all? Or is it about both sides of the argument appropriating and exploiting a complicated history for present gain, namely political and cultural power? More on that in a moment, but first let's lighten the mood. Maybe a better way to go about this is a quiz, okay? Can you recite the preamble to the Constitution? Anyone? Well, as evidence of the Constitution's deep reach into popular culture.
Constitution of the United States. Now, we had to memorize the preamble of that. I still remember it.
You do?
Yeah. Here, I'll show you. Hold the book on me.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Constitution of the United States. Why don't you just give me the first word and I'll know the rest.
Okay, we.
We. We?
We.
Are you sure?
I'm looking right at it.
Oh, we. We.
The.
Thee. We thee. We thee.
People.
People. We the people. We the people. We the people. We the people.
Of.
We the people of
United.
We the people of the United flag, breathe, wind, wave, star, States. We the people of the United States.
In order to form a more perfect
to form a more perfect union. In order to form a more perfect union. Establish justice.
Ensure domestic tranquility. Provide for the common defense. Promote the general welfare. And secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity to ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. You want to run through that again, or do you think you got it?
I got it. You learn something, you learn it.
All we say to America...
Oh, oops, sorry.
All we say to America...
No, there we go. So that's a bucket list item. I've shown Barney Fife in chapel now. Actually, there we go. Other possible questions for our quiz. How many articles are there in the Constitution? Anybody? That's right, 7. How many amendments are there in the Constitution? Correct, 27. Very good. What is the only amendment to be amended by another amendment? That's right, Prohibition. That's right, the 18th and 21st Amendments. True or false, Thomas Jefferson was the primary author of the Constitution? False, he wasn't even at the Constitutional Convention. True or false, Thomas Jefferson believed that constitutions were not everlasting but should be ripped up so that each generation could write its own constitution? That is true. That is true. So that's one way we could go about it, do some Constitution trivia.
All we say to
Sorry, we'll get back to that in a moment. Perhaps we could look at how the Constitution has been invoked in American history since 1788. We could look at hundreds of Supreme Court decisions, including famous and contentious ones, Marbury versus Madison, the Dred Scott decision, Brown versus the Board of Education, Roe v. Wade, Obergefell versus Hodges. We could explore the huge debate over the relationship between national and state governments, or look at moments of national crisis like the Civil War, where the southern states said, we are the true heirs of the Constitution. We're the ones being faithful to its original intentions. And where Abraham Lincoln said, I am exceedingly anxious that this union, the Constitution, and the liberties of the people shall be perpetuated in accordance with the original idea for which that struggle was made. And I shall be most happy indeed if I shall be an humble instrument in the hands of the Almighty and of this his almost chosen people for perpetuating the object of that great struggle. And of course, this was on the eve of the Civil War. Now, there's another clip, and you all already know it's coming, that we could point to in American history. Let's look at this from Martin Luther King Jr., challenging our nation to live up to its ideals invoked in its founding documents. This was the closing statement of the final speech King ever gave a day before he was assassinated in Memphis.
All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. And so just as I say we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
What a remarkable statement. Powerful, prophetic. And so let me get to my real point on this Constitution Day convocation. Perhaps we need a prophetic spirit as well, though I'm unworthy of the title and unqualified to carry out that task. But friends, just as King invoked Moses in that riveting conclusion, let us remember another moment from the life of Moses as we consider our own political situation. Recall Moses coming down from the mountaintop where he received the 10 Commandments, only to find his brother Aaron leading the impatient, idolatrous Israelites in the construction of a golden calf. Our idols come in many shapes and sizes, so while this may seem like an ancient world kind of thing to do, rest assured that we all have our golden calves. Even in the realm of politics and patriotism, even the Constitution, a document that is very much worthy of our respect and adherence, but that is sometimes revered and treated as if it were inspired and inerrant scripture, can be a golden calf. Despite the role that the Christian faith has played throughout American history, even the idea of Christian America, the combination of faith and nationalism, can be a golden calf. Are you spending time, energy, resources, historical thinking on defending a concept of a past Christian America that needs to be recovered? Consider that you may be simply dusting an idol on the mantle. Christian America is an idol. On the flip side, perhaps your idol is using the Constitution and selective quotations from the founders to construct a purely secular America, founded solely on Enlightenment ideals while ignoring any evidence to the contrary. Secular America is an idol too. Allow me to push this a bit further. Does your faith line up perfectly with either modern American liberalism or conservatism, or more specifically with the platform of the Republican Party or the Democratic Party? If so, I would ask you to consider what a remarkable coincidence that is. Do you see either party's electoral fortunes, or a Supreme Court decision for that matter, in salvific terms, determining either America's destiny or Christianity's well-being? If so, I would ask you to consider how partisan politics can become idolatrous when we grant them an authority and a prominence they do not merit. Let me be clear, I am not saying it is wrong to have liberal or conservative political leanings or to vote for one of our two major political parties. But like all things, if we attach the imperatives of faith to the power struggle at the heart of partisan politics, the line between integrity and idolatry vanishes. We're in the midst of another presidential campaign, an unholy combination of wealth, celebrity, naked ambition, family dynasties, and popular resentment is already on full display. And Democrats and Republicans alike will reference the Constitution and argue that they are the defenders of that document. Meanwhile, both parties will rail against special interests while collecting billions of dollars from elites funneled through super PACs, those mega political action committees that allow wealthy donors a way around the law that limits what you can donate to a particular candidate. Candidates and their supporters will tell us this is the most important election ever, while painting their opponents in extreme terms. Nuance and charity will make way for the politics of distortion and destruction. Fear of the other side will be the central talking point. Marilynne Robinson, a Pulitzer Prize-winning author who also happens to be a person of faith, recently wrote in the New York Review of Books that contemporary America is full of fear, before reminding us that fear is not a Christian habit of mind. She continues, granting the perils of the world, it is potentially a very costly indulgence to fear indiscriminately and to try and stimulate fear in others just for the excitement of it, or because to do so channels anxiety or loneliness or prejudice or resentment into an emotion that can seem to those who indulge it like shrewdness or courage or patriotism. But no one seems to have an unkind word to say about fear these days, unchristian as it surely is. So how do we respond to all this? How do we respond to the bipartisan politics of fear, to a pretty dismal political culture that fuels idolatry, provokes animosity, and props up a broken system? How do we respond to the culture wars being fought by many politically engaged conservatives and liberals in this country? The culture wars are a battle for cultural power and political supremacy by groups that reside in their respective echo chambers, preaching to the choir, nursing grievances, and rarely extending the benefit of the doubt to the other side. The easy response, and one that's quite tempting to me if I'm honest, is a sense of resignation, to withdraw in either disgust or despair. It is what it is. Back to my smartphone. Let's call this response the collective shrug. But in the spirit of First Amendment protections of the free exercise of religion, freedom of assembly, and freedom of speech, allow me to suggest an alternative to the collective shrug. We need to reinvigorate, if not revolutionize, our understanding of politics. The Greek philosopher Aristotle once wrote that man is a political animal, and he wasn't prophesying the emergence of Donald Trump, nor was he suggesting that humans are wired to passionately care about partisan politics. Aristotle's understanding of politics was based on the polis, the Greek word for city-state, but that for Aristotle also conveyed the human community. When he suggests that we are political, he means that we do not live alone. We are meant to live together, not just for living, but for living well. Not just for basic survival and material needs, but for striving toward the good life, a life of virtue that promotes human happiness and flourishing. Alan Jacobs, a very thoughtful Christian scholar at Baylor University, once wrote, "We are too prone to believe, I believe, to think that voting is the definitive political act. That would be true if politics simply belongs to the government. There is a far vaster sphere of politics, the life of the polis, that belongs to everyday acts of ordinary people. What an interesting phrase, the everyday acts of ordinary people. I'm reminded of a poem by Wendell Berry with an amusing title, and it's called Manifesto, the Mad Farmer Liberation Front. And the poem begins with these lines, kind of a jarring beginning, and you know, a poet's goal in some ways is to provoke thought. Love the quick profit, the annual raise, vacation with pay. Want more of everything ready-made. Be afraid to know your neighbors and to die, and you will have a window into your head. Not even your future will be a mystery anymore. Your mind will be punched in a card and shut away in a little drawer. When they want you to buy something, they will call you. When they want you to die for profit, they will let you know. But then the poem shifts into another vision of life. So friends, every day, do something that won't compute. Love the Lord. Love the world. Work for nothing. Take all that you have and be poor. Love someone who does not deserve it. Denounce the government and embrace the flag. And Barry continues on. The poem continues with suggestions of ordinary acts of the polis, of the human community that point to a vision of flourishing that transcends the status quo. But I want to highlight two more phrases in particular. Invest in the millennium. Plant sequoias. Say that your main crop is the forest that you did not plant, that you will not live to harvest. I love that image. Invest in the millennium. Be part of creating and developing something that gives life, even if you don't get to experience the rewards. Build relationships, communities, or even civilizations that lay a foundation for those who will come after you. The Constitution, by the way, is a sequoia. It wasn't created out of thin air, but instead reflects centuries of effort, practice, and wisdom by many. But Barry continues later in the poem with these lines. Expect the end of the world. Laugh. Laughter is immeasurable. Be joyful, though you have considered all the facts. You know, that rich phrasing brings me back to the same Alan Jacobs piece I mentioned a few moments ago, and it provides the basis of thinking through a new vision of politics. Jacobs writes that his most important political responsibility is to try and bear witness through word and action to this double vision of the earthly city, a long defeat followed by a longer joy. Those are some interesting phrases. A long defeat, a longer joy. I mean, Barry's poem seems to hold those ideas together as well. Expect the end of the world. Laugh. Be joyful, though you have considered all the facts. But where does Jacobs get these ideas of an earthly city, a long defeat, and a longer joy? Well, he gets them from three sources: St. Augustine, J.R.R. Tolkien, and John Milton. So I want to unpack these three concepts of a new political vision. The earthly city is a phrase from St. Augustine, whose early 5th century work, City of God, is one of the most important Christian reflections on politics ever written in the context of living through the turmoil of the late Roman Empire. Augustine writes that in this world we have two cities intermingled throughout history: the earthly city and the heavenly city. And each city is defined by what it loves. The heavenly city is defined by the love of God. The earthly city is defined by the love of self. James K. Smith writes about this Augustinian concept that the city of God is not just otherworldly. It's not just heaven. The city of God is that society of people who are called to embody a foretaste of the social and cultural life that God desires for this world. We are to follow the advice of the Old Testament prophet Jeremiah, who tells us to seek the welfare of the city. The earthly city is not simply to be resisted or avoided. The goal is to annex the earthly city to the city of God, thereby reordering creaturely life to shalom. Now, what is shalom? Some of you in IS 102 classes this term may ring a bell. The biblical vision of shalom is a picture of human beings carrying out our responsibilities to each other, to God, and to nature. It's a restored and reordered creation that is characterized by peace and justice and joy. But even as we seek to model the shalom that one day will be fully realized, we continue to experience what J.R.R. Tolkien called the long defeat. Tolkien's phrase is first used in The Lord of the Rings, but he fleshes it out a bit later in a 1956 letter. Actually, I am a Christian, he writes, and indeed a Roman Catholic, so that I do not expect history to be anything but a long defeat, though it contains, and in a legend may contain more clearly and movingly, some samples or glimpses of final victory. Tolkien, prior to creating the marvel that is Middle-earth, fought in the First World War. A stark reminder that the modern assumption that history is a story of progress is highly questionable. Every day, we are overwhelmed with evidence of the long defeat in the form of sufferings, tragedies, injustices, inhumanity toward one another. Alan Jacobs notes that Tolkien's phrase was a favorite of Paul Farmer, the doctor who helped start the nonprofit group Partners in Health. Farmer and Partners in Health bring the marvels of modern medicine to those in poverty and need across the world. And he was the subject of a book by Tracy Kidder called Mountains Beyond Mountains, which is primarily about his work in Haiti. And while Partners in Health have done incredible work there and across the globe, they come face to face every day with the scale of the problem, with hardship, with failure, with desperate challenges well beyond their capacity to fix. Farmer tells Kidder, how about if I say I have fought for my whole life a long defeat? How about that? How about if I said that all it adds up to is defeat? I have fought the long defeat and brought other people on to fight the long defeat, and I'm not going to stop because we keep losing. Now I actually think sometimes we may win. We want to be on the winning team, but at the risk of turning our back on the losers, no, it's not worth it. You see, the long defeat is not the politics of withdrawal or resignation or despair. The long defeat is the politics of the cross, reckoning with the darkness on the face of the earth while walking with the suffering and the broken and the impoverished and the defeated. We must remember, though, that the politics of the cross go hand in hand with the politics of the resurrection, which is echoed in Tolkien's glimpses of final victory, and in that Jacob's phrase, the longer joy. And this brings us to our third source, John Milton. John Milton in Paradise Lost, one of the powerful sequences of that work is that after Adam and Eve have fallen, the archangel Michael shows Adam a vision of the future, which forces Adam to reckon with the utter devastation of the fateful decision that they have made. Adam is filled with grief, but then is shown the divine plan of redemption, culminating with the incarnation, the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Adam is also told of a far happier place, a new heavens and a new earth. And so Jacobs draws his concept of long joy from Milton scholar Stanley Fish, who writes the following about this conversation between Adam and Michael. What he learns is the politics of long joy. In the politics of long joy, the meaning of things and events is foreknown. Meanings are never new. What is not known is the specific and often surprising form this unvarying meaning will take. Friends, the politics of the resurrection means that the outcome is certain. The new heavens and the new earth, a world redeemed and restored, a polis living out perfect shalom. This is the future. And while we may not know or understand all of the particulars of this unfolding story, we, like Adam in Paradise Lost, know its conclusion. Do you know what we need to do? We need to do what Wendell Berry concludes that poem with, these two words: practice resurrection. We need to embody in our community here and our other communities outside these gates the politics of joy made possible by the resurrection itself. Our political vision is not too big, it's too small. Our goal is your goal to win political battles and cultural supremacy? Or is it to be a faithful presence, bearing witness to the coming shalom, seeking the welfare of the earthly city, walking with the hurting and broken amidst the long defeat, while holding out hope for the longer joy? You see this statue up here. It's a statue called, or sculpture, I should say, called Reconciliation. It stands at the bombed-out remains of Coventry Cathedral in England, devastated in the Second World War. A replica stands at the Hiroshima Peace Park in Japan. In settings that evoke the long defeat, places devastated by war, these stand as a powerful symbol of the shalom we long for, the reconciliation we long for. So on this Constitution Day, let me just say, yes, know your Constitution. Be an informed, engaged citizen. Don't ever take the stability of your country for granted. Plant sequoias for future generations. Be grateful for constitutional provisions to think and speak freely of the politics of joy. And remember Martin Luther King Jr. asking our country to live up to its constitutional ideals. King was living the long defeat, the politics of the cross. And like Moses, he did not live to see the promised land. He did not experience justice, peace, and joy fully realized in his lifetime. But he didn't lose sight of the politics of the resurrection, evident in those final stirring words, "My eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord." Thank you.
Patrick, you have given us some very important challenges. I hope you feel the weight of the questions, the very important questions that he has left us with, the important responsibility that we have to engage our culture, our polis, our nation thoughtfully and well, with knowing and having confidence in the hope that Jesus has brought for us. Would you please stand and come together? We end our chapels and our convocations with a blessing, not just so that you are reminded that you go and God goes with you, but we send you out to pursue the gospel, to pursue manifesting the kingdom of God in this place with one another, on your halls, on your teams, in the CAF, wherever you go. So friends, be sent. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up the light of his countenance and give you his peace now and forevermore. Amen.